Hello everyone. So in this video, I am going to discuss our chapter 4 entitled Pardon. So what is pardon? So pardon is a form of executive clemency granted by the President of the Philippines as a privilege to a convict as a discretionary act of grace. So, ibig sabihin po, ang pardon po ay isang forms ng executive clemency. So, when we say executive clemency, this is granted by the President of the Philippines. So, isa na po dyan ay ang pardon. So, it is a privilege to a convict as a discretionary act of a grace. A pardon is a remission of penalty. It is an act of grace or forgiveness that relieves the person pardon from some or all of the ramifications of lawful punishment. A pardon may be conditional or unconditional. Pardons do not erase or seal a conviction. A pardon forgives guilt, and it is vested to the chief executive as a matter of power. So, pardon is a form of executive clemency which is exercised by the chief executive. So, ibig sabihin, ang nag-exercise po or nag-grant po ng pardon ay walang iba kundi ang ating mahal na Pangulo. It is an act of grace and the recipient of pardon is entitled to it as a matter of a privilege. The exercise of pardon is vested in the executive. So, ibig sabihin, neither does the legislative branch of the government, okay, or have the right to establish condition nor provide procedures for the exercise of the same. Hence, it is vulnerable for the abuse by the executive. So, ibig sabihin po, wala pong magagawa ang judicial branch of the government and even the legislative branch of the government if the president wants to grant pardon. Kaya nga po ang executive clemency talaga ay isang vulnerable na example wherein pwede po itong abusuhin ng ating mahal na Pangulo. Kasi nga po, yun ay power that is vested to him. So, ibig sabihin, yun po ay kanyang matter of right. Okay? Or a matter of power. Pardon is an act of grace proceeding from the power entrusted with the execution of laws, which exempts the individual on whom it is bestowed from the punishment the law inflicts for a crime he has committed. It is a private, though official act of executive magistrate delivered to the individual for his benefit it is intended. Okay? And not communicated officially to the court, and pardon is a deed to the validity of which delivery is essential, and delivery is not completed without acceptance. So, di ba kanina nga nasabi natin, pardon has two kinds. We have the absolute and we have also the conditional pardon. Okay? Sabi po dyan sa last part, a pardon is a deed to the validity of which delivery is essential, and delivery is not complete without acceptance. So, ibig sabihin, hindi po mapoprovide or mabibigay sa'yo ang pardon kung hindi mo ito tinatanggap. Pero, you need to take note, if the pardon is absolute, take note po when the pardon is absolute, the convicted person has no option at all and must accept it whether he likes it or not. His consent to absolute pardon is not indispensable, hence it is valid upon issuance. So, ibig sabihin, wala kang magagawa kapag gusto kang bigyan ng mahal na Pangulo ng absolute pardon. Take note, absolute pardon. Wala kang magagawa kundi yun ay tanggapin. You have no more option. But, take note, in case of conditional pardon naman, the convicted person has the right to reject or refuse the pardon. Okay? Ano ang reason wherein pwedeng i-reject ang conditional pardon noong offender? Okay? If he feels that the condition imposed is not favorable on his part, this kind of pardon is considered a contract between the pardoning authority and the pardonee. Hence, consent is indispensable for its validity. So, ibig sabihin, kailangan mo na ng consent mo kung tatanggapin mo yung conditional pardon or hindi. Kasi nga, ang rason dyan, bakit pwedeng i-refuse ang conditional pardon ay baka hindi favorable yung mga ibibigay ng kondisyon sa part mo. Okay? So, maaaring yun yung reason bakit pwedeng i-refuse or i-reject ang conditional pardon. Pero take note, ulitin ko, sa part po ng absolute pardon, hindi po yun pwedeng i-reject. Okay? Ibig sabihin, you have no option at all, so you must accept whether you likes it or not. Pagka absolute pardon. Okay? So take note, neither the legislative nor the judiciary branch of the government has the power to set conditions to establish procedures for the exercise of the presidential prerogative. So, ibig sabihin ko, sa part po ng conditional pardon, wala pong magagawa dyan ang legislative branch of the government at saka ang judiciary branch of the government na magbigay ng mga kondisyon or any procedures, kasi nga po, yan po ay vested lamang po or power lamang po ng ating mahal na Pangulo. Okay? It is only an exercise of our Chief Executive. When a pardon is granted, the convicted offender is forgiven the crime and its penalty. Okay? A head of state or government generally grants when the convicted individual has fulfilled his or her debt to society or is somehow otherwise worthy of being forgiven the crime. Kumbaga, sapat na yung kanyang mga nagawa na pagbayaran yung kanyang mga nagawang krimen. So, he is now entitled na mabigyan ng pardon. Okay? It is somehow otherwise worthy of being forgiven the crime. The pardon does not erase the conviction. Take note, it does not erase the conviction, but it can in some jurisdiction remove some of the disqualification caused by it. Diba kasi marami pong mga nagiging disqualifications kapag ka ang offender po ay convicted by final judgment. Pero pag ikaw po ay nabigyan ng pardon, some of the disqualifications may be removed. Okay? We have two types of pardon. Okay? Absolute pardon refers to the total extinction of criminal liability of the individual to whom it is granted without any conditions whatsoever and restores to the individual his civil rights and remits the penalty imposed for the particular offense of which he was convicted. Okay? When we say absolute pardon, okay, this is granted without any conditions or without any strings attached. Okay? So, ano po ang purpose ng absolute pardon? Okay? Number one purpose is to right a wrong. Okay? Para po itama yung mali. Okay? Because nothing in this world is perfect. Okay? Even the administration of justice can escape this phenomenon. So, wala pong perfecto kasi kahit po ang pagbibigay ng hustisya ay hindi rin po perfecto. Another purpose po ng absolute pardon is to normalize a tumultuous political situation. Those in power brand critics and oppositions against an incumbent regime as criminals and subversives. Okay? Absolute pardon is also granted by a president to an imprisoned president the incumbent has deposed. Okay, ano pong ibig sabihin niyan? So, yung presidente pong pumalit doon sa presidenteng convicted by final judgment, ay pwede po niyang i-grant yung kanyang dinipose na president. You know what happened to Joseph Ejercito Estrada? Okay? Actually, this happens in many countries, but in our jurisdiction or in our country, in the Philippines, ang example po niyan is Joseph Ejercito Estrada and Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. Remember, Joseph Ejercito Estrada is or was convicted by plunder. Okay? And then, ang pumalit sa kanya bilang presidente is Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. Now, Gloria Macapagal Arroyo granted absolute pardon to former President Joseph Estrada, who was convicted by Sandigan Bayan for the crime of plunder. So, pwede po yun. Yung mismong nag-depose po doon sa bilang presidente ay pwede din po niyang grantan ng absolute pardon yung presidenteng natanggal. Okay? Absolute pardon is granted in order to restore full political and civil rights of political and civil rights to convicted person who has already served their sentence and have reached the prescribed period for grant of absolute pardon. Pero take note ha, one of the effect of pardon is that a pardon shall not work the restoration of the right to hold a public office or the right to suffrage, yun po yung right natin na bumoto at tumakbo sa eleksyon. Okay, unless such right be expressly restored by the terms of the pardon. Actually po, hindi po binibigay po ng full ang karapatan po sa politics. But rather, pwede po yan maibalik kapag yan po ay mismong na-express doon sa mga conditions or terms ng pardon. Okay? Actually, number 2, the two types of, or the second type of pardon is conditional pardon, which refers to the exemptions of an individuals with certain limits or conditions. Okay, so ibig sabihin, pardon or a conditional pardon is one under which the convict is obliged to follow certain conditions. Kasi nga po, from the word itself, conditional pardon, meron po mga certain limitations and conditions na kailangan niyang sundin. So, he is obliged to follow all of the conditions. Okay? From the punishment that the law inflicts for the offenses he has committed, resulting in the partial extinction. So, ibig sabihin, partial lang po yung pagkakatanggal ng kanyang criminal liability. Kaya nga po doon sa last chapter natin, one of the causes of partial extinction of criminal liability, another is conditional pardon. So, it is also granted by the President of the Philippines to release an inmate who has been reformed, but it is not eligible to be released on parole. Okay? So, yan po ay mga binibigay sa mga hindi po eligible sa parole. So, nabibigyan po sila ng conditional pardon. So, ibig sabihin, meron pa rin pong mga kondisyon na kailangan nilang sundin. So, ang conditional pardon po, take note po, ito po ay parang isang kontrata. Okay? Alam nyo ba ang kontrata? Meron pong mga terms and conditions na kailangan yung pag-agrihan bago ka po mabigyan or bago po mag-took effect yung kontrata na yon. So, ibig sabihin po, conditional pardon ay kontrata between the convicted offender and also the President of the Philippines. Kontrata po nilang dalawa yon. Okay? So, when is pardon granted? Kailan nga ba binibigay ang pardon? So, take note, pardon is granted only after final conviction. So, nabibigay lang po yan kapag yung offender ay meron na pong final judgment. meron na pong hatol. As provided under Section 19 of Article 7 of the present Constitution, except in case of impeachment or as otherwise provided in the Constitution, the President may grant reprieves, commutation of sentence and pardons, and remit fines and forfeitures after conviction of final judgment, by final judgment. So, a pardon granted after conviction frees the individual. So, kapag po nabigyan ka na po ng pardon, ibig sabihin ikaw na po ay makakalaya. Okay? Frees the individual from all the penalties and legal disabilities and restores him all his civil rights. So, binabalik po lahat ng iyong mga civil rights but unless expressly grounded on the person's innocence. It cannot bring back lost reputation for integrity and fair dealings. Okay? So, what agency recommend to the President the grant of pardon? Sino nga ba or ano nga bang ahensya ng ating gobyerno ang nagbibigay ng rekomendasyon sa ating mahal na Pangulo kung sino po ang bibigyan ng pardon? Okay? The pardon may be granted by the President of the Philippines upon recommendation of the BPP or the Board of Pardon and Parole. Okay, actually, the BPP is the administrative arm of the President of the Philippines in the exercise of his constitutional power to grant pardon. Actually, the BPP composed of 7 members, all appointed by the President with the Secretary of Justice as acting chairman. So, ibig sabihin po, ang pinaka-acting chairman po ng BPP ay ang Secretary of Justice or the Secretary of DOJ. Okay, however, in practice, one of the undersecretaries of the Justice is serving as acting chairman. Okay? The law requires that the 6 board members should include, okay, ito po guys, di ba nga 7? Yung 7 po yun, yung isa na po dyan is the Secretary of Justice, which is the chairman of the Board of Pardon and Parole. And then, yung natitirang 6, okay, yung 6 po na dyan, nire-require po ng ating batas na dapat po sila ay isang sociologist, clergyman, priest po yun, pare, educator, a lawyer, a penologist, and at least one is a woman. Okay? Doon po sa mga members ng BPP, at least isa po sa kanila dapat ay babae. Okay? The BPP is the agency charged with the release of sentenced prisoner based on modes specified by the law. Its action and proceedings are governed by provisions of Section 4 of Act Number 4103, otherwise known as the Indeterminate Sentence Law as amended, and Executive Order Number 292, Series of 1987, otherwise known as the Administrative Code of 1987. So, take note, ang recommending agency po sa President ay ang Board of Pardon and Parole. So, limitations of the pardoning power of the President. Ano ba ang limitasyon ng ating mahal na Pangulo? Okay? So, here are the following limitations. It may not be exercised for the offenses in impeachment cases. Okay? Under Section 19, Article 7 of the 1987 Constitution, in a very strict sense, an impeachment proceeding is not judicial proceeding, neither criminal prosecution, and therefore beyond the ambit of pardoning power. But when the government official is already impeached from his own office, and the latter on charge and convicted criminally in an ordinary criminal action, the President may extend pardon to him. So, ibig sabihin po, kapag po si Presidente po ay under po ng impeachment case, hindi po siya pwedeng magbigay ng pardon. Pag nasa impeachment case pa lang po siya. Pero kapag for example na-impeach na siya, okay, natanggal na siya sa pwesto bilang presidente, pwede po yung susunod na presidente sa kanya ay magbigay po ng pardon doon sa natanggal na presidente. Kagaya nga po ng sinabi ko kanina, na example ko po ay kay Joseph Estrada at kay Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. Nung natanggal po si Estrada, pumalit po si Arroyo, binigyan niya po ng absolute pardon si Estrada. Okay? Another limitations po ay, it may be exercised only after conviction by final judgment except amnesty. So, ibig sabihin po, lahat po ng executive clemency kasama na po ang pardon ay binibigay lamang po kapag po meron na pong final judgment. Except lang po sa amnesty kasi po binibigay po ang amnesty even before or final judgment. Okay? Before or after final judgment. Another po na limitations ng ating president is that in case of violation of election laws or rules and regulations without favorable recommendations of the COMELEC. So, ibig sabihin po, kapag po ang case nung binibigyan ng pardon ay about po sa rules of election, okay, dapat po i-recommend po yan ng COMELEC or Commission on Election. Okay, sila po ang recommending agency sa ating presidente kapag po ang kaso ng bibigyan ng pardon ay about sa election laws. So, what is the effect of pardon? Actually, the pardon has generally been regarded as blotting out the existence of guilt, so that in the eye of the law, the offender is as innocent as though he never committed the offense. Binibigay po ang pardon, okay, once granted na po ito, as if no crime committed doon po sa grantee. Okay? Lumalabas po na siya ay isang inosenteng tao sa mata ng iba. Okay? So, it does not operate for all purposes. The very essence of pardon is forgiveness or remission of guilt. Okay? Pagpapatawad. Okay? Na ibinibigay po yan ng ating mahal na Pangulo. But take note, pardon implies guilt. Okay? Once you are being granted pardon, ibig sabihin po talaga, guilty ka doon sa nagawa mong krimen. It implies that you are guilty. Okay? Kasi nga po, di ba nga, binibigay lang po ang pardon after final judgment. But it does not erase the fact of the commission of the crime and the conviction thereof. So, it does not wipe out the moral stain. Hindi po dyan na-erase yung crime na nakumit mo. So, ibig sabihin, it only involves forgiveness. Okay? Pinatawad mo lang, pero hindi mo nakalimutan yung kanyang nagawang krimen. Okay? Parang yung ginawa mo lang din sa mahal mo, 'di ba? Pinatawad mo lang pero hindi mo nakalimutan yung kanyang mga nagawang kasalanan. So the same with pardon. It is only granted because of forgiveness but not because of forgetfulness. Okay? Ano po ang basis ng pardon? Okay, ang basis po natin ay Section 19, Article 7 of the Philippine Constitution. It reads, except in cases of impeachment or as otherwise provided in this Constitution, the President may grant reprieves, commutation of sentence, pardons, and remit fines and forfeitures after conviction by final judgment. The President also have the power to grant amnesty with the concurrence of the majority of all members of the Congress. Okay? So, ano naman po ang mangyayari pagka na-violate ang kondisyon ng pardon? Ito po ay dun sa mga nabigyan ng conditional pardon. What are the remedies of the state if the condition of pardons are violated? So, under Section 64, letter I of the Revised Administrative Code, The chief executive is authorized to order the arrest and reincarceration of any such person who, in his judgment, shall fail to comply with the conditions of his pardon, parole, or suspension of sentence. So, ibig sabihin, ang mismong presidente ay may power para ikaw ay orderan na arestuhin ulit at ikulong ulit kapag ka alam niyang nag-fail ka na i-comply or sundin yung mga binigay niyang kondisyon. Okay? Upon determination that a prisoner granted with conditional pardon has violated the conditions thereof, the board shall recommend his arrest or recommitment to the president. Okay? Even po ang Board of Pardon and Parole, meron po silang power na mag-recommend kay President na ikaw ay arestuhin at ikulong ulit pag nalaman nila or napatunayan nila na violate mo nga yung mga kondisyon ng iyong pardon. Okay? Thus, when the conditions are violated, the offender is considered in evasion of service of sentence. Okay? Ibig sabihin, kapag po once na violate mo ang kondisyon ng pardon, ibig sabihin po doon, ikaw na po ay liable for evasion of service of sentence. Okay? And ang mangyayari po dyan, you will be rearrested and reincarcerated by the order of the President and under the revised administrative code or prosecuted under Article 159 of the revised penal code when the penalty remitted is 6 years and below. There will be an additional penalty. Okay, take note. Meron pong additional na penalty. Kasi nga po, kapag yun po ay below 6 years. Pero po, pag yan po ay over 6 years, ibig sabihin 6 years and above, the remaining sentence shall be served without additional penalty for evasion. Okay? So, yun po yung mga topics natin about the pardon. Okay? Pardon, an executive clemency granted by the President of the Philippines. So, please be updated for more videos and have a good day. So, thank you.